Okay, so jumping right into it, this Gaza situation, I mean, some of these headlines are pretty intense.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something we need to pay attention to. And what's interesting here isn't just, the U.S. saying something to Israel like that's happened before. It's what they're saying they might do this time.
Right, like saying that military aid to Israel might be on the line if things don't change in Gaza within 30 days even. I mean, that's not just talk, that's serious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's serious because, and I think this is important, the U.S. helping out Israel's military like they have been, that's like a really big deal historically. Even when they don't agree on stuff, that money usually keeps going. So this feels different.
It does, and it's not just the US either, right? Like some of these sources aren't holding back. The Times of Israel even used the term arms embargo, but then you've got like BBC being way more, I don't know, careful. Is that just how they're saying it, or is there something more going on? Oh.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's always a carefulness with words when countries are involved, right? The
Yeah.
Jerusalem Post even said the U.S. threatens action. Like, that ups the ante for sure. But reading between the lines, what it seems like to me is the U.S. trying to walk a fine line. They want to keep their relationship with Israel strong. We all know that. But there's also this huge pressure internationally to actually do something about what's going on in Gaza, the humanitarian side of it.
Totally a balancing act, especially with what the UN's been saying, like it's really dire up in northern Gaza. I mean, aid just got there after being stuck for, what was it, 2 weeks? It's just layer upon layer of complexity here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that delay really highlights how urgent this all is. This isn't some kind of political game anymore. This is about actual people who are in a really, really bad situation.
Which brings us back to the US and what they decide to do. Like, that's the big question, because whatever they do, it impacts everything. Israel, obviously, how this whole conflict might even play out, but also the people stuck in Gaza who need help now.
Exactly. If that aid gets cut off, sure, Israel's military might be weaker on paper, but then what? Does that change how this whole thing is fought? And on the other hand, I mean, people need food, water, they need help. It's messy. Diplomacy, politics, people hurting. It's all tangled up, and we're going to see how this plays out.
Wow. Yeah, it really makes you think about, the impact of these big decisions. But speaking of big, one of the other stories you sent over, it's Google, but this time they're going nuclear.
Yeah, and not in a small way either. This partnership with, what was it, Kairos, right? To power their data centers with microreactors by 2030. That's a pretty big swing.
Microreactors. Okay, so like the first thing that pops into my head is like some kind of sci-fi movie prop, all glowy and stuff. But are we talking like actual viable tech here? Or is this more like, I don't know, wishful thinking?
It's definitely not your, like, Chernobyl-style reactor, that's for sure. These are way smaller, more self-contained, not those huge plants we usually picture. Think of it like this. It's still nuclear fission, that powerful stuff, but like a more controlled, miniaturized version.
Okay, so tiny nuclear power plants, basically. But I mean, 2030, that's what, 6 years? Isn't building this kind of tech like a decades long thing?
It is, yeah. It's a
Yeah.
massive undertaking. Lots of regulations, safety stuff, just getting them built on a larger scale.
Hmm.
It's complicated, but there's a reason Google's putting money on this, and it's not just because it sounds cool.
Let me guess. Because those data centers eat up power like crazy.
Bingo. And the more we rely on them, the worse they are for the environment. Microreactors, they could be a way to get that energy, that constant power, but make it way more efficient, less reliant on fossil fuels and all that.
So good for Google, good for the planet, maybe. But gotta ask, what about the risks? I mean, it's nuclear. There's always a what if there, right?
Of course. And those concerns are valid, absolutely. But the thing is, these microreactors, they're designed from the ground up with safety as like the top priority. Different fuels, lower temperatures, they've got built-in stuff to make those big meltdowns like super unlikely.
Okay, so maybe less scary than they sound initially. Still, a gamble though, right? Which, funny enough, kind of takes us to another Google thing you found. This one, a little more on the mysterious side. The whole doorway in Antarctica showing up on Google Maps.
Leave it to Google to accidentally create a conspiracy theory while they're busy mapping the world.
I know, right? Sounds like something out of Indiana Jones or something.
Uh,
But of course, I had to go down the rabbit hole a bit. So, what's the real story behind this Antarctic anomaly?
well, tempting as it is to imagine some hidden portal to another world, the most likely answer is way more, well, boring. Geologists are saying that shape, that doorway, it could just be from erosion, ice moving around, how nature does some pretty crazy sculpting sometimes.
So, nature and the internet's tendency to turn anything kind of weird into a huge mystery.
Pretty much. But it does make you think, right? Like, we can explore the entire world from our computers now, but are we losing that sense of wonder about what's actually out there?
It really is. Makes you realize how much we still don't know, even with all our fancy tech. But speaking of things we need to pay attention to, one of these articles, it's kind of a sobering reminder that nature, well, it doesn't always play by our rules.
You mean the anniversary of that nasty storm that hit Philadelphia? Yeah, that one was rough.
Hmm.
Easy to forget about hurricane season once summer's over, but
Especially for those of us, living in places where those things actually happen. That anniversary really drives home that preparedness. It's not just a summer thing, unfortunately.
for sure. And on a totally different note, but speaking of things we need to be ready for, ChatGPT's back at it again. Did you see this one? A new prompt, and it's got Sam Altman's stamp of approval, apparently unlocks some next-level creativity in that thing.
Yeah, this wasn't just another look what ChatGPT can do article. This was about how we're using it, right? Did you get a chance to play around with that new prompt?
I did, yeah. And it's actually pretty wild. So instead of giving it instructions or like asking it to summarize stuff, this one is more about getting it to think differently, like make weird connections, be more creative with its output.
So less assistant, more like, I don't know, an unpredictable art buddy.
Exactly. It's kind of cool to see how we're pushing these language models not just to spit back info, but to actually come up with stuff, ideas, even art. It's a whole different ballgame.
A little exciting, little unnerving, kind of par for the course with AI these days, right? But okay, switching gears totally here to a story that's just as much about making you think as it is about, well, bad luck, honestly. The whole Bitcoin in the landfill thing, that one got me.
It's like the perfect example of how we think about digital stuff versus, the real world. Guy throws away a hard drive, no big deal, right? Except, oops, it had a ton of Bitcoin on it. Now it's gone, buried with who knows how much trash.
Ugh. It's like that feeling when you lose something important, but it's not even something you can really hold. It's just gone. And a huge chunk of someone's money, too. Just gone like that.
And it makes you think about this whole idea of mining Bitcoin, right? We say that, but it's not like digging up gold or something. It's code. But that code, it lives on physical stuff, which, as this guy unfortunately found out, can break, get lost, disappear just as easily as anything else.
It's true. As much as we like to think we're moving into this digital future, we're still tied to the real world in a lot of ways. Makes
Yeah.
you wonder what else is out there, stories we don't hear, things that make us question what we think we know? And honestly, that's what I love about these deep dives.
Me too. Connecting those dots, finding those weird little stories, realizing how much there is to learn, even when we think we're drowning in information. It's a wild ride. Until next time.